him to stop at any time, Frank? Can he just go like that to you?
You can stop anytime
Just-
if you want to back up and go over something. The sequence doesn't matter, because when we edit it, we can take anything out of sequence, put it here, there, in the middle. Doesn't matter at all. So,
You can ditch the whole thing, huh?
right, which is what Charlotte wanted me to do with hers, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Oh, that
Oh,
was,
you want
well,
to-
Anytime, Charlotte.
Frank, were you born in Cobleskill? And if so, what are some of your earliest recollections and fondest memories?
I surely was born in Cobleskill on 25 Union Street. It's still there. I remember going to first grade. Must have been about 1916. I remember somebody was out of order. One of the kids was out of order, and the teacher came and slapped everybody's hand. That's one of my earliest memories. In the second grade, well, what did we do there? We used to bring white cloth to school and snip it all up for the soldiers in France during World War I. Life goes on from there in kind of an ordinary way. I do remember my brother, next younger, and I used to go take soap orders, if anybody ever heard of that. Larkin Company in Buffalo. You could get their catalog and you could sell so many tubes of shaving cream or whatever they had. I don't remember all the items. We used to take those orders and get a premium then. I remember we got a chair swing for the whole family. That was great. Then life was ordinary, I guess, through school, through grade school and high school. Not too much to worry about there, I guess, was ordinary. Grades were satisfactory almost. What else, Charlotte?
Did you work? When you were going to school, did you work, Frank?
We always worked, our family always
I know.
worked. My dad had a store, and it required some physical labor by the manufacturers at home. We used to roast peanuts, and we used to pack ice cream in those days.
Could we back up just a sec?
My dad had a store at the corner of Division in Maine where he sold candy, ice cream, and peanuts and popcorn. The peanuts always required some work by the younger generation. We had hand crank a peanut roaster, and my dad would be up in the upper story on the main floor and sell peanuts at nickel a quart, something like that. The ice cream was packed in those days with ice and salt, and that was a job for us youngsters. We'd drag ice on a cart from home, from back in the old ice house, and chop the ice and pack ice cream, and it had to be done every day to keep it solid. And out in the front of the store, my dad had a popcorn machine. When the steam engine ran out, we used to have to crank that by hand. That went on for many years, and my dad was in business there and sold tobacco products, fancy candies. And there was no beer or anything in those days. It was all soda pop, ice cream sodas. Hold off a minute. The store at the corner of Division in Maine my dad's store was a real hangout for teenagers. I don't know how he handled them all, but they behaved fairly well. He used to steal peanuts out the peanut warmer, but not when the old man was around, because some of the girls. There was a big family of us. We all took turns when we were old enough to wait on trade. Sell candy, cigarettes, ice cream, sodas, peanuts and popcorn. And the guys used to, mostly fellows that were hanging out there. Probably most of them were smoking their first cigarettes. This went on until about, as I recall, about 1921 when my dad was ousted out of the store. Somebody else bought the building and he had to move. And he bought a piece of property at the corner of Grand Street and West Main. Built a little wood store there, wood building, and started in all over again. I can remember moving from the first store at Division in Maine to the new store and carrying the fan that was the ceiling fan. My brother, next brother, younger than I, carried that. It almost took off down the main street with us. I remember that. But we finally got it down to the new store without breaking it. It was quite a heavy thing for a couple of youngsters. Got down there safe, and then the store took off fairly well because there's always a group of young Florios around that attracted high schoolers. And then down there was across the way from the park where the gang used to hang out in the nice weather. Come over and buy peanuts or popcorn or ice cream. Then later my dad started a little gas station on the very point of land there. And from that time on up until very recent, there was a gasoline station there on the corner. Various owners, but finally my brother and I, my brother Joe and I, took it over. In comparatively modern days, about 45 years ago, and ran it, and finally got it. After we got out of the service, both of us were taken into service, and my good wife and the young lady ran the station while we were away for 3 so years. When we come back, we started the used car business there, and did fairly well. Finally sold it to the present operators of the convenience store corner. You can hold off a minute for see what goes on. We used to have a couple of competitive gangs that would play, you call it hide and seek these days, but we did it on a bigger scale. And after dark, and there was Frank Weeding and my brother Joe, and there was Robert Buck and one of the other Buck boys. Who else? There was a gang, Harold Dennison, Everett Byer, Harold Byer. Oh, let me see, who else? 3 or 4 Florios. And we were rival gangs. We didn't raise heck so much because we had fun. And it was after dark and you'd capture each other by tagging them out or something. I remember we used to pester one poor guy. His name was Lawyer. Lived on Union Street, and the youngsters used to pester the hell out of him by putting a pin in his doorbell switch. Let it ring until one of the daughters would come out. We used to call her White Rat. Don't ever mention it to anybody. There was a gang there that lived near us. Other than that, we used to play some under the street light at night once in a while to get us a couple of small groups and play stick hockey on, with a puck of some sort. Until it was time to go home. My dad closed his store about 9 o'clock ordinarily. That was the store on Division in Maine. And the street was then paved. Brick pavement. Lots of horse and wagons. With accompanying slide stuff. Well, then we went on, Joe and we went on to school, and that was routine, mostly work and study. most of our family, several of them, Catherine, my sister Catherine went to Albany Teachers College, worked her way, and taught school for several years after that, many years. Another sister, Elsie, took a business course and then worked in an office, local office. Hardly refrigerator, I guess it was in those days. Anna followed me at Cornell. My brother Vince, next older, studied radio and finally television. Was a pretty good technician. I had one brother who was in an auto accident and had a head injury and wound up epileptic. He was next younger. He's the one that who used to work with me on soap orders. But he lived quite a long life with good care. I lost one sister in a drowning accident a long time ago, back in 1922. It was a local tragedy, of course, of the day, with a family so well known and not much wherewithal to do things here in emergencies. But there was a lot of public help on that one. Then let's jump over to the wartime. Joe and I and my brother Raphael were all in the service for about 3 years. Joe was an officer, I was in the medics, and Raph was in the Marine Corps. But we got out of it unscathed. Joe Raff was the one that saw the worst of it. I saw a little service in Europe and the Philippines. We got home safe. We went back to the business on the corner of West Main and Grand. I used to start a used car lot and did fairly well there. After that, we closed that business, and I took a job with the village as water superintendent, having served on the village board in the meantime. So for 20 years I was water superintendent, finally water and sewer both. And that was I still am connected to the water and sewer departments a little bit as a consultant, even after having worked all those years. But to get into detail of that would be quite a story in itself.
Rick?
For us. He used to say, Frank, I don't know how I'm going to keep you in business until you get a new plant built. He'd hammer the steel down and put weld straps across the brake and weld it shut again. In the meantime, I'd scream at the village board, we got to do something. When it gets to 1962, we had the new plant up near the reservoir. And that lasted until very recently when they had to rebuild that and upgrade it, modernize it, a lot of change in the laboratory control of the water. It's a lot different than it used to be. The old plant at East Street was one of the first plants around that incorporated chlorination in its treatment. In fact, when the plant was first built, there was no chlorination. That was in the days when you'd get typhoid from drinking dirty water, even though it was filtered. The filter was a monstrosity itself up at the gatehouse at the plant. They had wooden racks that the men would have to lower down into a deep well where the water came in. And that was let me see what was used as a filtering agent. They had some kind of stuff they used on those racks to catch the dirt and the twigs and the leaves and everything that came down the stream. And they'd winch it up and clean the racks off. I never saw that work. That was before my time. But the elements of it were still there when I went to work there. Since then, the village has built two new reservoirs, and we capture all the water that the watershed would yield, which is as far as we can go in that respect.
Where'd you get the water from at that before
Always, it was always from the same watershed. First of all, there was up along Dow Street, just one pond that the village had done back in 1886. And then and that was just a pond of water with a pipe coming to the village. After a while they built this, they saw the need for a filtering plant, and built, I think it was in 1914, something like that, or maybe before, when they built the filtering plant downtown. And the basic water main system in the village is still some of the pipe from 1886. And companion to that, of course, was the sewer system. That was developed in 1892. The basic sewer system still exists in the richest red tile pipe under a lot of the streets yet. So they designed pretty well in those days, and built well. I think we do likewise today. I don't think so.
Nothing special.
I think the village has been a fairly ideal place to live and bring up children. I think a good group of people have lived here. In the early days when I was a kid, we used to think it was mostly retired farmers, but since then there's been an influx of other people, and with the college furnishing a great deal of the activity and benefit to the village, really. Makes it a little college town, which I think is ideal. One thing I'd like to back up on would probably be church, if you dare to mention church. Our family, of course, is of Italian descent. And it was always kind of interesting to me how we got that, how come we were Lutheran instead of Catholic. And it seems that my dad at home in the old country, as he spoke of it, apparently had a priest that was a little out of the ordinary, and he said that they were brought the poor people up, in a real, what do you call it? Oh, I forgot the word. Anyway, raised people and scare. Isn't the word I'm trying to think of either. Anyway, my dad didn't like the idea of the way that religion handled people. And when he came here, anyway, he was trapped by some good Lutherans, the Kennedys. He roomed when he came over here from the old country, which was way back, probably about, I think 1888 was when my dad first came here. And in the first part, they were building the railroads, and they used to live in cars along, or work cars, and kind of a hellish existence, the way you tell it. And anyway, Kennedy's was where he lived, as a rooming house, the way I understand it. And there wasn't any Catholic church, and they got him going to the Lutheran church, and he liked it. And there wasn't that superstitious factor that he'd been angered about or unpleased with in the old days. And so the whole gang of us were brought up Lutheran, which is kind of unusual. There, in Cobleskill, I guess there might have been maybe 3 or 4 families of Italian Lutherans. I don't think you'll find it in many other communities. Most of them did, I think, a little bit better than the others. For I don't know what reason. But it was personal care by the Kennedys and the Hawkins and the others who helped bring us up, I guess. Did I ever mention that there was a big family of us? There were 15. My mother had 15 children. And of those, 13 were living for way up until modern days. Presently, there are only 7 of us left. My oldest sister is 91, Mary Southcott. She lives in Florida. And there's Joe, who's 84, lives over on Elm Street. And it was quite a family, I can tell you. We never went hungry, but we never had too many luxuries. My dad was always good. He said you can always have a place to eat and sleep as long as you go to school. And that is a little bit unusual, probably. Some of the other boys from the other side of the track. We lived on the north side of the track, by the way. The kids on the other
that
He
about,
came from Italy, you mean like when he came from Italy?
well, maybe that and what it was like, just in the store, what it was like, and you were just saying how, people apparently was very well liked, and apparently a lot of people knew him, so I mean, is there anything in particular you'd like to say about him and was in the store? And
No, that was the store was his living and his devotion, as far as that goes. He worked there, gosh, day and night. About the only recreation he had was he liked to go hunting for rabbits or partridge or something. He'd take a day off in the store when the boys were big enough to tend the store. And we didn't waste any of the game that he brought back. It was always eaten. I often marveled at my mother being able to feed 13 of us. There was something at the table, I can tell you. But she was a great cook for such a group. Of course, my dad used to buy spaghetti and cheese and olives and stuff all on a wholesale basis. And I remember putting apples and cabbage and potatoes in the cellar for the winter. My mother used to bake the bread. My dad was kind of a strict disciplinarian. In fact, I don't remember him ever hitting anybody in anger except one sister once, who got her shoes wet and got near the stove with him, and they hardened right away. Of course, that's the worst thing you can do, a leather shoe. And I suppose she just bought him. She got a spanking for destroying them, being careless. But other than that, he only had to speak, and the rest of us would jump into line, My mother never had to slap anybody. I don't ever remember her slapping me. I can remember being mad at her once and throwing all the rubbers at her off the back porch. I don't remember now. I don't think I ever hit her. I don't remember why it was. I was pretty young then, I guess. But she was a loving mother. There wasn't any question about that.
So over on Union Street there,
That was Union Street.
a lot of the neighborhood kids would come around, and did you have a big backyard there?
Well, just an ordinary backyard. But the deal was next door. The apartment house that's there now on the south side was a lumber yard and what they make, they made window sash. And we'd get in the backyard, there was a lumber pile, of course, and that was the Sunday afternoon playground. And I remember the kids, I remember one boy across the street being walloped all the way home for playing on Sunday in the backyard over there. But there was always somebody to play with. If they came to our house, there was always somebody their age, to play with. Whether it was that or whether it's to go out bicycling. I remember buying a bicycle for $5. My dad didn't even have to chip in on it.
Now, out of all the kids, where were you in there?
I was in the younger half. Well, I forget what number. About 9, maybe. I'd have to stop and figure it out.
So that in itself, of course, like you said, must with all those kids, must have attracted so many kids. Must have been more like a school around your house most of the time than a...
It was a play yard. The kids had rammed through the house from front to back, whether they belonged, whether they're Florios or not. Looking for somebody their own age, I suppose. I can, and when they're teenagers, they'd come just the same, I remember Peg DeVoe Thompson. I can remember her eating cold spaghetti, which we thought was the worst thing in the world, of course. We liked it warm. She was one. Lena Drum, you remember Lena Drum? They were friends of Elsie's particularly. That was the ordinary life, that was every day.
So then
My dad would insist that we go to school. If you missed school, you were in trouble. We always accused him of having a spy up in the store anyway when he wasn't there. There was an old gentleman that used to, Mr. Mott. It was always in the store, he never said much, but if the gang was around, we always looked at him with a jaundiced eye because we figured he was spying and telling the old man. I don't know if he ever did or not. And that's the way it went.